Hello everybody. Welcome to the launch of our impact report and thank you for joining us. My name is Fleur and I'm a director of Respace projects. I'm going to jump straight to the report so that we can have as much time as possible. Let me share my screen with you and feel free, if people do have any questions, I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat box. So feel free to mention anything as we go. Now, let me share our screen. Brilliant. Now, holistic regeneration, social solutions to resilience and reducing waste. It is a bit of a mouthful, but in reality, the concept is really simple. It's about sharing the resources that we have with those who need them most to achieve a more sustainable and, dare we say, happy society. The ZeroLDN project has been an ideal case study for this, and I hope that this report gives just a flavour of the positive impacts and benefits that such a project can have. So the image is from our third sustainable fashion show, which was an ocean theme, and the children designed all their own costumes through a series of workshops, which was lovely. Our Instagram handle is @Respace Projects, and the same for Twitter. So as I said, please do give us a follow. Now, just to talk a little bit about regeneration currently, in a city where space is at a premium, and homelessness is rising, small businesses are routinely priced out by corporate chains. Urban regeneration really has become synonymous with gentrification. We can see some figures there about the amount of land and the amount of buildings that are just sitting empty. And there are thousands of buildings in the city, many of which could be productively used by those with limited access to resources traditionally. We should be using this space to give communities places to work, innovate, organise, play, learn, and even live. Currently, nearly 2/3 of existing meanwhile space is used by property guardianship companies. And this simply isn't a healthy option for Londoners or the economy. There's some really interesting literature around that by Ferrari and Dalston, which I would urge you to read if you're interested in this. So what is holistic regeneration? So sharing empty buildings and resources with community projects won't end or solve gentrification, but it does give much needed space for those who need it to solve their own local issues, learn new skills, and generally build that resilience that is so important and that has become a little bit of a buzzword recently. Allows them to solve issues themselves. And we obviously came up with the word respacing, which is about temporary use of space for communities and for general social good. The term meanwhile does exist for, it's an existing concept for the temporary use of space, but it lacks the ethical and social requirement, which can lead to it being exploited, as we've seen with these property guardianship models. And I think that's quite an important distinction to make. This is a picture from of Gretchen, actually, again, and her little sister. They were at it was one of the workshops that they did. So for the second fashion show, they decided that the children, they wanted to make their own outfits. And so they kind of took over one of the collaborator studios, the Relive project, and they learned how to make outfits with fusing plastic. And in fact, one of the children described the ZeroLDN project as the best place in the world, which was very touching for us. Now, Respace started out in Hackney in 2015 with our first project, the Hive Dalston. We've had 5 projects since that time, as far away as Peterborough and Southend. So it was a real pleasure to come back to Hackney, where we've got existing local networks, and felt a little bit like we were back on home turf. So this image is, if you look carefully, you'll see that's G, the founder of ReSpace. He's hanging a hand-printed sign, which was made from materials that we reclaimed from a local supermarket yard, which was brilliant. So that was for our third open house. Now, there's a few interesting numbers that I draw your attention to here. We estimate that the Zero London project, which ran for 6 months, saved around £103,000 for local people in the hire of space over that 6-month period. And we estimate that around £10,000 worth of resources were also saved from going to waste and instead saved for use by the community over that same period. Now, we'll come back to these statistics a little later, but it is worth noting that this whole project was entirely voluntary run and had no funding whatsoever. And I would like to read from one of my favourite testimonials from the lovely Keo Yendi, and he's the Gillette Square Engagement Coordinator. So he says, I'm responsible for managing the pop-up playground and safeguarding the children in the square. Since ReSpace have been active in the square, it has opened up. People have started respecting the space more, and it's been much calmer generally. Local people and local businesses are collaborating in a way that we've just never seen before. It was very nice to hear. Right, next page. Now, we did an online survey towards the end of the project, and I'm going to read out some of my favourite responses to the question, how would you describe the project? It is a much needed resource that can create spaces open and inclusive for all the community to benefit from. A brilliant way to create community spaces. A beautiful example of what inspired individuals are capable of imagining when in an environment that gives them the time and space to do so. Although everyone has come from different backgrounds, it's been a place where to see differences as a way for us all to learn about where we can go in our personal lives. And also amazing, world-changing. And I think the reason these are important is that they just go to show that actually even visitors to the project, people really become quite inspired by what can be achieved when you have access to these free spaces. And that's why this is very important. The survey was only actually given out to about 20 people, and they tended to be collaborators or people who'd visited the space. We did want people from the local area to engage in the survey more, and a few of the parents did, but it's worth noting that a lot of the people locally, they either don't really use the internet that much or they don't have smartphones, so it was just harder to engage with them on that level as an online survey, but still. Now, as you can see from the contents, I'm first going to outline a little bit about ReSpace and Zero London before exploring the impacts more deeply. And then we've also got some case studies from some of our wonderful collaborators who had studios in the project. So ReSpace we set up in 2015 to help address issues of waste and inequality. Over this time, we ran our first project, the Hive Dalston, for over 2.5 years, and that was on a startup cost of just £250. That covered public liability insurance and a couple of fire extinguishers to start with. But since that time, we've gone on to support ReSpace projects in Peterborough, Highgate, Newham, Southend, and we've also advised numerous other groups in Romford, Cornwall, Islington, Crouch End, and Croydon. So this has all been achieved, as we said, with no funding. We're all volunteers. So it just goes to show that you don't need money to do these things. We have been featured by the Huffington Post and on the BBC, both TV and on Radio 4. And we've also received some testimonials from quite important people, including Noam Chomsky, who described our work as important. And last year, the photo at the bottom there, we won 2 awards at the Sustainable City Awards. We received the Innovative Spaces and also the overall winner. And we were up against some like councils, big chains, and it was international as well. So that meant rather a lot to us. Okay, and so little bit now about Gillette Square. At its best, Gillette Square is a vibrant, musical, family-orientated space. It is beautiful. At its worst, it can be an occasionally chaotic or even bleak area. There is a strong sense of community enhanced by the pop-up playground, but there was a lot of issues there, and there was a building that overlooked the square which was being redeveloped. So Respace accepted a collaboration with the building owners, Hackney Cooperative Development, to safeguard the property in exchange for rent-free use of the space for community projects in that time. And as we mentioned earlier, we estimate that actually our involvement saved the landowners, Hackney Cooperative Developments, around £10,000 on basic security just in that 6 months alone. We worked that out based on the fact that they would probably require cover for, say, 3 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, when it could get a bit busy, for 26 weeks at an hourly rate of £12. Incidentally, they did actually have a security guard in the project before we got there, and the poor guy had his laptop stolen. So, yeah, right, we've got some photos here that I would just like to talk you through. The first one is when Keogh's pop-up playground came inside for the day, and the children are actually playing in what used to be a solicitor's office. So that's real change of views. The next photo is from the fantastic Relive project, and they did a late night pop-up towards Christmas, selling kind of guilt-free gifts made sustainably and using wasted materials. Now the third picture is the square working beautifully. You can see it's full of bubbles, children, families, people playing. It really is a really vital space for people. Then the next photo is lovely Dara, a local model at the 3rd Sustainable Fashion Show. Then we have a picture of the famous Loom Room, which again became very popular. We'll go into that a little later. And then the final picture is from a social enterprise workshop from one of our collaborators. Let me make a move here. Now, excuse me, it can be really difficult to capture the rich and varied feedback that we've received from visitors to the space, often because the most valuable comments have been from people who are in vulnerable situations, and there's some ethical issues around that. So this report is by no means exhaustive, but it just gives an indication of the breadth and variety of social impacts. And I would like to say as well that Respace specialises in dealing with these transitional spaces, and that stepping into existing communities requires real sensitivity and inclusion and transparency and open mind. And it can take time and it can be challenging, but it's very vital. We have so many of these transitional spaces. The photo there, that image, is from when the Mayor of Hackney, Philip Glanville, came and had a look around the project. There he is in the Respace office. So we'll go to the next slide. A few more pictures from an event we did as part of a winter fair. It was a 2-day event, and we held a Christmas dinner. It wasn't just for homeless people, it was for everybody, but we made a point of inviting lots of local homeless people. As you can see there, we had a Christmas tree, which we found in the loft above one of the studios. And thanks to the amazing Streets Kitchen and a lady called Joan, who arranged all the food. And it was a really just inclusive, beautiful event, actually. And then we also ran alongside it something called a street boutique, which was arranged by our fashion stylist, Twinks, and our life coach, Miranda, in which people could come and choose items for themselves, as well as a couple of items as presents for friends. How are we for time? Okay, we're good. Now, I mentioned before that we estimate that we saved about £103,680. That was a saving by local people in the comparable cost of hiring the space that we gave them. The way we worked this out is looking at what space hire sits at locally, which is about £10 an hour. And then we worked out what the workings out of there, and you can have a look at that in more detail if you go online. But we, in addition to the studio spaces themselves, we also had 2 sort of bigger communal rooms for activities such as film nights, Wing Chun, which is like a martial art, yoga, physical training, life coaching. And these as well, we saved we did about 180 hours of weekly events over this period. So that's another saving of £1,800 saved by local people. I'm going to move on to the next slide because I want to show you these photos. The first picture here is from a session that was run by the Relive project. They basically got involved with a local campaign group to save the Ridley Road Market, which is another really vulnerable, really vital community resource. And I would urge you all to have a look at that campaign. But what was really amazing is that the Relive project works with, waste plastic, waste materials. And so here, the sign themselves, you'll see the colourful, if you can see the colourful writing, Save Ridley Road, that's actually made from fused plastics that's real leftover waste from the market itself. And it was, became really beautiful. So next photo, we had some children at the stencil making workshop using offcuts of wood to learn about carpentry. Then the loom room was doing free knitting and weaving workshops, which again proved really popular. I think it was very unexpected for people to have that free resource. Then down here we have a vision board workshop. The children loved the loom room. And then there we've got the Halloween themed children's film night. Right. Sorry to be rushing through, but there's a lot to say. So this is Tom. He set up an enterprise called Atomic Bubbles. And he said that us giving him space gave him the opportunity to really expand his vision for Atomic Bubbles. And in fact, he ended up being involved in an immersive art piece at the nearby Vortex Jazz Club, where I think he experimented with like scented bubbles and UV and things. So that's quite amazing. Now, onto the impacts. As I said, it's very, there can be a lot of crossover between these, and it can be quite difficult to capture, but we've tried to separate them into themes just for ease of reference. Okay, so mental health. One of our collaborators, they established a weekly men's group which explored male identity and role models, and that became really, really popular. And it showed that there was actually a lot of demand for that. We had wellness and mindfulness sessions from qualified life coaches, art therapy. And, we also had a lot of reports from people who were living with trauma or illness. And they say that the project saved their life. And it's not a small number either. It's quite incredible what these things can do for people. Physical health, so we had 14 boxing and football training sessions, 14 self-defense. Streets Kitchen were doing bi-weekly distribution of food for homeless people. And we also had a really amazing local bakery who were giving us their surplus bread. And this was sacks of bread baked freshly that morning. That was probably quite expensive bread. And there they are. There is our lovely volunteer distribution team. You can see in the image there. And a big thanks to Dusty Knuckle Bakery for being very kind. Now, environmental health, it is London Climate Action Week. So this is really key. But environmental behaviours were promoted throughout the whole project, from diet, waste, energy, recycling. And obviously the name itself, Zero London, is a nod to our ambitions to have zero impact, to become zero carbon, zero waste. I'd like to draw your attention to the image here at the top. This is the amazing Ange from the Relive project. And there she is gathering cardboard waste from the local supermarket yard. And they deserve a massive shout out, actually, because over the 6 months, the Relive project managed to produce just one small bag of proper rubbish for landfill out of 6 months of their studio being really busy. We also, you can see the next photos, we're making signage for our recycling bins, and at the bottom there are our recycling bins for the project that I believe we made out of we made them out of advertising promo signs from JB Sports, and they lasted really well, so they did a good job. Family health. We were able to engage people from the square who traditionally present problems at the door. So one of my favourite statistics, is there was a young dealer who he would hang out outside the door and get on with his sort of like business activities. But over several events, he joined us for several events, including a couple of open house workshops, where he came and he got the time to spend with his children and his girlfriend away from his usual activities in the square. And it's a small thing, but it's also really important. Parents reported how much their children had grown in confidence, and that instead of just playing in the square, they could come and learn skills and get involved in the range of activities. Parents also reported that they really enjoyed the opportunity for sort of co-parenting and sharing the responsibility, because it meant that they could, one of the parents could nip off and do some shopping and come back and know that the others were looking after their children, these sorts of things. And the first image is at the children at the first fashion show, where they just wore headpieces from the Relive project. And then there they are at the second fashion show, where they made their own outfits out of fused plastic and ice bags and carrier bags and things like that. They really grew in confidence during the trajectory between the 3 different fashion shows, and it was beautiful to see. Okay, we're okay for time. So speaking of the workshops that the children did for their outfits, these are some pictures from the 3rd fashion show, and you can see up there, top left, I think that's Ebony. She made an amazing, I mean, they all made amazing outfits, and they all made it all by hand. They were, they were learning different techniques. They were learning to sew. Different collaborators were helping them. They then chose slogans for their protest banners that you can see here, and then they printed them out using really just efficient stamping methods. The bottom middle photo is them they had a little after party to celebrate their role in the Relive project. And they also each took turns on the mic. So they walked the steel platform, and then they spoke their demands into the mic and introduced themselves. And it was a really big deal watching them grow from being really, really shy to really proud of themselves. That was a real pleasure. Okay. Excuse me. So jobs, education and enterprise. And obviously this is they're all really important impacts, but certainly policymakers seem to quite like this one. So giving spaces like this give people access to workspace, technical equipment, places where they can learn new skills, share new skills, get experience for the CVs as well. I mean, everybody who's been involved in the project, myself included, our professional life has all benefited from being involved with Respace projects. One of our collaborators, the stylist, Twinks Burnett, she starred in a BBC documentary called Misfits Salon. That was a series about the impact of fashion on mental health. And she says that having access to the Zero London studio space was a pivotal moment in her career. The project supported 16 pre-established groups and helped launch 11 other enterprises into the early stages of development. Safety and crime. This one is also really key. So local authorities, including the Gillette Square management, local law enforcement and community members have commented that the square feels safer with fewer violent incidents. The local law enforcement officers also commented that they've noticed the benefits of having Respace present during the building's redevelopment. And generally, we've tried to engage local residents, authorities, businesses and communities to help have a more coordinated and long-term approach to safeguarding in the square. Okay, another page of photos. So here we are in what was the old solicitor's office. Made an ideal games room. As you can see, we had giant chess. Then we had, that's an introduction to tabletop loom weaving, which was a really versatile activity, actually. Again, when it came to the 3rd photo along, that's in the woodwork, Cut Above Creations. And when it came to our open house events, Kyle did not stop. So people really loved the opportunity to actually get hands-on with some of the machinery and take something away, even if it was a stencil that they'd made themselves. At one of our open house events, we had an aromatherapy and hand massage stall. They were super professional. It was really very exciting day that was. And then the Fast Fashion, as we shall call them, held weekly print making workshops, which was really popular with the Extinction Rebellion youth team in particular. And now social health. This is a really big one. Several people who reported feeling socially isolated and lonely thanked us for making them feel welcome and inviting them into the project. Local women in particular were literally relieved by the opportunity to have access to the toilet on request, because despite the fact that Gillette Square is a public space, there is no toilet, and that's a massive, massive problem. So we allowed people to come in whenever they rang the bell. And despite this, actually, the toilets remained cleaner than previously when the doors were locked to the public, but people would sometimes sneak in. So I think that says quite a lot. People said that they liked seeing the place animated in the evenings with workshops and late night shops. They said it made them feel safer at night. And in previous years, people tended to avoid the square after nightfall, but now it had a real sense of place. People said that passing people said, what a great example, other councils should be doing this, other landowners should be doing this. And a couple of local people joined us at an open meeting to discuss the project's impact, commenting that people like what you do and are really inspired by what's being achieved, going on to say that the project has had a big impact on the community, which felt uplifted. And really that sort of feedback, it means an awful lot, because you know it's coming from a really authentic place. People have nothing to lose from telling us, no, we think it's rubbish, we don't want to get involved. So that was a very important point for us. And also it's worth saying we were proud to observe that each time we kept the front door fully open, as in literally wide open all day, and that was at our 5 open house events, the building was treated with utmost respect. Local people helped us out with carrying things, lending things, even cleaning up. It was a real collaborative effort in every respect. Okay, better hurry up a bit here. So this is the photos Sisters on Decks, which was a feature of the Relive late night pop-up. Here we have a photo of some master's students who were studying social enterprise from Goldsmiths University. They came to visit the project. That's them in the Respace office. One of them described it as a perfect place, which was very gratifying to hear. Bottom left, we've got our founder G at one of the first collaborators meeting. And then bottom right, you can see that square activated, as it were, at night time. And it just looks like a safer, more friendly, more welcoming space. So a few more survey results and answer to the question, has Zero London positively impacted Gillette Square? So again, I'm going to read you through a couple of my favourite responses. The Zero London project has allowed people to imagine the possibilities, which is then a kind of reassurance rarely found elsewhere. Even if their own energy is spent elsewhere, it can empower them to change and be closer to what they want to do. Okay. It's showing people who otherwise would not have had the chance that there is an alternative way of doing things that leaves a lasting positive feeling. And a bridge, so Respace or Zero London project, was a bridge between the long-standing local Gillette Square community and the landlords of the building. Inclusive, it has helped to reduce the them and us mentality and had a positive impact on reducing antisocial behaviour and safety in the square by presence and community activities. That's really important. Getting locals involved in crafts and creative, sustainable activities, inspiring the younger generation in a somewhat troubled area. Oh, this one is one of my favourites. It seems much less of a place that is on edge in a dystopian way. It gives disadvantaged people of all ethnicities and wealth, a chance to be creative, learn new skills and work together. And it strengthened the community with the feel of people looking out for each other. And there was a lot of that, more community spirit, united as a community, helping each other out as it should be. More interactions between various groups that use the square as well. People had a feeling that everybody was looking out for each other. And that was really powerful. Right, I better hurry up here. So here's a few photos from our third. Oh no, this is just some photos from the variety of fashion shows. So the Ferro Arts Collective was one of our collaborators and they curated all 3 fashion shows. So a massive thank you to them. They did a great job. Models wore clothes and jewelry from local artists and designers. Again, these were all sustainably made. And actually, we found, so the steel catwalk was clearly ahead of the curve, because a week later, we found that at the Paris fashion show, Chanel showcased a rooftop catwalk with a very similar aesthetic. So we're doing something right. So changing minds. Obviously, our work with communities is it has to be transparent. We're very transparent about our purposes and operations, and we're very welcoming to everybody. So that's really important, because I think sometimes people, they're not sure about what we do. They almost think it seems too good to be true. There must be a catch. So you have to be very flexible and tolerant. But we have found that generally we do encounter some resistance from people who might be a bit suspicious or slow to trust, but we do find that the projects tend to speak for themselves, and most people become extremely well disposed to what we're doing. I'd like to read a couple more of these testimonials. One from the area regeneration manager for Dalston, who said, "I would like to thank you all for the wonderful work you and your organisation have done over the past few years. Your interventions have certainly enhanced and created opportunities for many local people and social enterprises within the borough." And then the mayor of Hackney, he said to us, "Respace has helped to realise Hackney Cooperative Development's early dreams for the square. The Zero London project is ideal for what is needed in Hackney. It's an amazing project." So that was very gratifying to hear. Sorry, it's a little bit noisy out there, so I hope that that isn't bothering you too much. So the first photo is the fabulous Ange and the Relive project at their late night pop-up. Next on the right, the fashion show made it into the Hackney Post, which made the Ferro Arts Collective very happy. Bottom left, we then have some amazing weaving demonstrated by Andrea from the Loom Room, who used old telephone cables which had been taken out of her house to make material for lampshades. And then the final photo is when Kyle from Cut Above Creations, who set up the men's group, was invited onto a panel to discuss mental health as part of his Men in Motions initiative. So here we have some of our Instagram stories, and again on the left hand side you can see actually the bar made by Relive, which was made entirely from cardboard. All that cardboard that you saw in the earlier picture, it was literally made from that, and it was so strong, so sturdy, so it was an excellent piece of furniture, and it looked amazing too. So it just goes to show what we can do, what we can make out of waste. The next picture is from when a charity called Small Steps, we gave them space in our project, and so they were able to hold their first ever zero waste shoe. They do celebrity shoe auctions to raise money for children who live on landfills, and so that's a picture of them on London Live promoting their shoe auction. Next photo is again from the carpentry studio, Cut Above Creations, was so popular, it never stopped at open house workshops. And then the photo on the right was a pop-up Angolan food event, which took place a couple of weeks after that room was a solicitor's office. So that was a real turnaround of space. Okay, now some online survey results here. Zero London is a great place to learn new skills and information. Do you agree? 15 strongly agree, 6 agree. Empowers people to get more actively involved in social issues. Do you agree? Again, 16 strongly agree, 4 agree. Has Zero London helped to increase your understanding of environmental or social issues? 13 people said a lot, 8 people said a little. And since joining Zero London, has your behaviour grown more environmentally responsible, such as recycling, dietary habits, what have you? 9 people said a lot, 11 people said a little. And again, it's a small survey, only 20 people, but I think they're really strong results. This is a picture of one of our collaborators, Chris, who helps run an organisation that tries to help other social enterprises with their business needs. And he says, the thing about Respace is it's so versatile, gives everyone a chance to have access to resources to help them start an enterprise or grow a business. And that's him speaking at one of the Men in Motion performances, actually. It became a really popular initiative. Great, so now we've reached the case studies. Let's go straight into those. This is a case study from Relive Project, and this is a social enterprise started by Ange King. She works with materials such as plastic bags, cardboard, rubber, newspaper, and she considers their lifespan, end use, and ability to biodegrade. This is really, really well done. Products include ethical jewelry, shoes, etc. And as a result of having the access to the space, she was able to accept larger commissions. As we saw, she did she helped out the local campaign group with the Ridley Road Market. And she also said that 1 in 3 visitors tended to buy something, whether that was a fair trade crystal, item of jewellery, or a tote bag. Next, we've got Cut Above Creations. So Kyle introduced probably about 100 people to woodwork, and he accepted larger commissions such as furniture, set up the men's group, spoke on the panel and radio show as a result. His room was actually next door to the Domino's Club, and he actually built them a new table using reclaimed decking from a development that was taking place adjacent to where we were. And that's just as it should be. Next, we've got the loom room. So this was artist and weaver Andrea Dawson. So she completed a 3 years textiles course, and she was able, as a result of us having space, she was able to rescue these 3 looms, stop them from going to landfill, and then set them up in the project and teach people how to use them. So the loom room probably introduced about 100 people to weaving, felting, knitting, and she saved around £3,000 worth of equipment from going to landfill, and another £3,000 was saved in terms of storage, so she didn't have to pay for storage over the 6 months. She was also able to rescue 5 knitting machines from going to waste and learned how to set up a counterbalance and a countermarch loom from scratch. And as we've seen, she was able to experiment with waste materials, including telephone cable. And if you can see here, the bottom right-hand corner, that's her working with industrial bubble wrap. Right, I better hurry up. This is a Small Steps charity. They're a great charity. They help children who live on landfill. And as we said, they were able to run their first ever zero waste celebrity shoe auction. They saved an estimated £5,750 on renting office space. I'm going to skip through that because I want to get to this. I'm going to read some of these recommendations because they're actually really important. Gillette Square is such an important place to so many people. And in some respects, the community there is more like a family to some people. It's extremely vulnerable because it's prime privatisation spot, and gentrification is a very real threat. So our recommendations are that the redeveloped building should include at least 1 large room managed by key community members for meetings, board games, consultation, indoor play, after school clubs, and more. This would enable the positive benefits detailed in this report to have sustained and long-term benefits in the area. And having such a space in this vital but deprived area would enable the goodwill, energy and respect that has taken root to really grow and flourish. And then the second recommendation is that because the economic fallout from COVID-19 will have implications for the development, with issues such as delays with builders impacting heavily on the initial redevelopment plans, we believe that the Regeneration project would most benefit from using local builders, craftsmen and tradespeople. This would help keep the money in the local economy, as well as giving people more reasons to be well disposed to the development. We also highly recommend that the redevelopment project should be revised to include green walls and renewable energy generation. These things should go without saying, but you know, it needs saying. It's also worth mentioning that by day 4 of the national lockdown this year, Respace had adapted the Zero London project to become a mutual aid support hub, which provided over 13,000 free meals to people who are vulnerable or self-isolating over 3 months in Hackney and Islington. And Respace was able to respond to the first wave of COVID in a way that councils and existing organisations simply are not able to, due to the nature of the slow-moving machines. I'd love to tell you more about this, but that would be a presentation in itself. We do have another impact report available for the mutual aid. So if you're interested in that, please just contact us, and if you'd like a copy. Okay, so this mural here, some of our collaborators were involved in facilitating the painting of this striking mural. They ran daily sessions in the square for a week for people to add their messages to the wall. And as you can see, that's a list of most of the people who were actively involved. It was a truly inspiring project, and it was an honour to be welcomed by the local communities. I have no doubt that a sensitive and progressive collaboration between the landowners, Hackney Council and local communities would create such a beacon for sustainable, community-led, holistic regeneration that it would trigger better practice across London. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that it has been an inspiring talk. We want to see a ReSpace building in every borough in London, self-managed by local communities. These are the places where people self-organise, learn, celebrate and support one another. If we're going to transition to become a healthy, sustainable society, we need to share our resources and make sure that these don't end up being further monetised and exploited by the corporate giants, as we've seen already with property guardianship companies. These resources should be ring-fenced for communities and the people who need them most. And that's what we're working to do. So thank you so much for listening. Please do follow us on social media. Talk to us, talk about us to your friends, families, MPs, councillors. And if you can help us, we would love to hear from you. It's all about cutting the red tape and getting this model out there so that more people can access it. We are at ReSpace Projects